Hello everyone, I'm Cindy Winget, the author of Gothic Horror Mashups, and welcome to my channel. So last week I did a massive book haul video, and when I do book haul videos, I always feel the need to do a book unhaul video because I figure if I'm bringing in that many books, then it's time to get rid of some so that I can have more space on my shelves. So I don't know exactly how many I'm unhauling. I think it's like 23 books or something like that. I could be wildly wrong, I don't know. Didn't really count. I guess I could count real fast. Okay, so I was wrong. I just counted them and there's actually 30 of them. So I'm getting rid of 30 books. We're gonna start with some science fiction books. We have The Andromeda Strain by Michael Crichton. And I did enjoy this book, but I wasn't like head over heels for it. I thought the mystery was pretty solid and I was intrigued enough to continue just to know what that mystery was, because it's about this mysterious virus that is out of this world, literally like an alien virus that came to Earth. And so I was intrigued enough to continue reading to figure out what was going on with this virus. I thought those aspects of the book were very intriguing. But the character development and the rest of the plot was pretty boring, and I didn't connect with any of the characters really. And I don't think I'm ever going to reread this, so I might as well give it to somebody else that might enjoy it, so I'm going to get rid of it. And then I have Dune by Frank Herbert. This is actually one of my absolute favorite science fiction novels of all time. I absolutely adore Dune, but I bought a better copy. Not better, because there's nothing wrong with this copy, but I think the cover is pretty ugly. And so I bought one that was pretty. So I don't need this one anymore because I don't feel the need of having two copies of the same book. So I am going to get rid of this because I have a prettier copy. That's really the only reason. There's nothing wrong with the book. It's one of my favorites. And then we have The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. And in the beginning, I was really loving this book. There was one chapter in particular that has to do with the human-animal hybrids that I just loved that chapter. I thought it was so, so good. And there is a heavy romance in this book, and I did like the romance, at least in the beginning, but then the romance took a turn and I hated the turn it took. It just kind of spoiled it, and I don't know, the more I went in, it was more about the romance and it was more about like a Mexican war and like historical stuff. And I wanted more of the sci-fi. I wanted more of the Dr. Moreau stuff, because that's why I picked up this book. Not for Mexican history. I picked it up because I wanted, mad scientist vibes. So, I don't know, I was pretty let down by this book, if I'm being honest. Like, it wasn't completely terrible, but it just wasn't quite what I wanted this book to be, because like I said, the emphasis was more on the history and the romance, and I wanted the emphasis to be more on the science. But I did think some of the chapters were really great and really intriguing. But as a whole, it just wasn't my favorite, so I just don't feel the need to keep this on my shelves. And then I have one fantasy novel, that's Heartless by Marissa Meyer. So I am a huge, huge fan of the Lunar Chronicles. I absolutely adore that series by this author, and that's the main reason why I picked this up. And this has to do with like Alice in Wonderland, and it's being told by the Queen of Hearts. It's her story. And I thought that was really intriguing. I always like a good villain story. But for me personally, the reason why she became a villain was A, very predictable, and B, it just didn't quite go with her character. So I feel like we're getting to know her through the entire book, and then the ending comes, and I'm just like, okay, even the character should have saw that coming. Like, she knew it was coming. And then when it happened, all of a sudden she just rages out. But it just didn't fit her character that we've been getting to know. And so I just thought for a villain story, I just didn't think it worked. And I don't know, it just wasn't quite for me. I sort of liked it, but after reading the Lunar Chronicles, I thought this one was a letdown because I know that this author can do better. So I don't know, it wasn't really for me. And like I said, I don't think the motivations behind our main character becoming the Queen of Hearts made any sense. And then we have Silver in the Blood. This was a book club pick for my book club, and I don't know, I really liked this book, and yet I didn't at the same time, because this has to do with what's her name, Dacia or Dasha, however you say that. And she was a real person in history. She has a brother Radu, who is also a real person in history, and talking about like vampires, going back to like Romania, and she's part of the Draculaskis, which is, you know, part of the Dracula bloodline and all of that. So I thought those parts were very intriguing because I love that. I love historical fiction when it has to do with like Dracula and Romanian history and all that. But I wanted more from the vampire storyline because this definitely isn't a traditional vampire book. This is definitely more fantasy, and they're not vampires in the traditional sense. They're more like just shapeshifters, and so some of them can turn into bats and some of them can turn into wolves, which I thought was a really cool idea, but I just wanted more. You know, like there was a heavy emphasis on some of the romance and the relationships between these two cousins, which are the two women that we're following in the story. And so I wanted the emphasis to be more horror. I wanted a little bit more darkness. I wanted a little bit more dreary gothic vibes, but it was definitely more fantasy. And I'm just not huge into fantasy anymore. And so while I liked this, it's not something I'm going to widely recommend. It's not something that I'm going to reread. It's not a new favorite, so I really don't need to keep it on my shelves. And then we have a YA novel called Snowdrowned. And this one was okay, but it wasn't quite up my alley because this is more cultish and like folk cosmic-y horror. And that's just not really for me. It's not the type of horror I typically gravitate towards. So while I didn't hate this book, I also didn't love it. And I should pass it on to somebody else that will like it more than I did. And then we have Alice in Zombieland. And I thought the concept for this story was really, really intriguing because yes, it is a zombie book, but these are not normal zombies. They're more like ghosts that kill you in a zombie-like fashion, and only certain people can see them, which I thought was really cool, like really good concept. But this is a YA book, and there was a lot of talk about sex and stuff, which I just don't think should be in YA books. And it's very YA in the fact that, you know, she's drooling over this bad boy, you know, and they're like instantly connected, like she just feels a connection with him. But so I don't know, I just feel like I'm kind of past that era, you know, like I probably would have loved this more had I been in my early 20s or if I was a teenager. But now that I'm 38 years old, I just don't need to read this anymore. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to read the rest of the series. I did read the second one, and the spice level was even cranked up more, which I just don't appreciate in YA because now that I'm a parent, I'm like, I wouldn't want my teenage daughter to read this necessarily, so I don't need to have it in my house. So I don't know. It was a good, cool concept, but it didn't blow me away. And like I said, I don't think I'm going to read the rest of the series. I think there's like 4 books, so I don't need to keep this. And then we have What We Harvest, and this is also a zombie book. And I really did enjoy this one. I thought it was pretty good, but again, it's not a new favorite. It's not one I'm going to reread. The cover is gorgeous, though. I love this cover. And I did think it was decent, but it wasn't like a 5-star or anything. It was maybe like a 3.5 star, which is still good. But if I'm looking to make space on my shelves, it's not going to make the cut, basically. So I should just give this to somebody that will enjoy it more. And then I have Road of Bones by Christopher Golden. And this book just really wasn't for me. I like the concept. I like the idea behind it. Sorry, I always have airplanes flying around my house constantly. So there's never really a good time to record my videos because it's always going to be background noise, and I'm so sorry about that. Hopefully it's not too annoying. But the concept for this book was really good. I really liked the idea of the Road of Bones, which is basically a road in Siberia, in Russia, where, you know, people who were sent to the gulags as prisoners, they were sent to build this road, and then when they would die of exposure and starvation, they would just build the road over their bones and just leave them there in the snow and in the ice. And so it became known as the Road of Bones. Very cool. And I do love a good wintry, snowy book, but was not the type of horror that I like because I didn't know there was a different aspect to this book, and I don't want to say what that is because it's a spoiler, but when I found out what was really going on, I just didn't like it. I was hoping this was like ghosts and like more of a haunted road. That's what I wanted this to be, and it just wasn't. There was only like two female characters. One was like an old lady that we didn't get to hear much from, and then there was only one other woman character, and she was just very bitchy, for a lack of another word. I can't think of how else to describe her. She complained a lot, and I just didn't really like her, and so it was like unfortunate that there was only one woman and I didn't even like her in this book. So yeah, I don't know. This one just didn't really work for me. And then we have My Darling Girl by Jennifer McMahon. And I love Jennifer McMahon's books, but unfortunately this one just didn't work for me. I didn't realize what this book was when I bought it. So I don't know if it's a spoiler to tell you, but I think I'm going to, because I think you should know what you're getting yourself into, because not everybody likes it. So maybe fast forward 10 seconds if you don't want to hear this. But this is about possession. And don't get me wrong, I like a good possession story, but for some reason, it just didn't work for me in this because it reads very, very much like a thriller. And so when I started talking about possession, I thought like it was going to be a twist. Like they thought it was possession, but then something else was going on, or I don't know why, but I was just like, that's not really what this is about, right? But then it totally was. This book was very straightforward, very like, this is what it is. And so I was like, oh, okay. And then I really didn't like the ending. There's something specific that happens in the ending, and I just didn't like that. I wanted it to end differently. So yeah, I just didn't love this one. As much as I love the author, this one in particular just didn't work for me, so I'm going to get rid of it. And then we have The Lost Village by Camilla Sten, and I really loved the atmosphere and the vibes of this book because you have this creepy abandoned village, and these people are doing a documentary or something. I think it's like in Norway or something. It's not in America, but so they go to this little village that had some mysterious thing happen there, and a lot of people died, and people, I think, are doing a documentary on what might have happened. It has everything that I would want from this book and I would love in this book, but for some reason, I just didn't connect to it as much as I wanted to. So a part of me kind of wants to reread it and just make sure that it wasn't just like a mood thing, because I should have loved this and just didn't. But I have so many unread books on my shelves that, yeah, it can sit there for years and I could potentially reread it, but I probably won't. So maybe I should give it to somebody else who might love this. And then we have The Fervor by Alma Katsu. And this is my first Alma Katsu book that I've read. And while I enjoyed the historical aspects, and I found it somewhat creepy because it has to do with a spider demon, and I hate spiders. But it just wasn't as creepy as I thought it was going to be, because it's talking about like the Japanese internment camps during World War II, and it has this spider demon that's in these camps, and I'm just like, wow, that is going to be so creepy and so intense. And it just wasn't. Like, I felt like the horror aspects were kind of like on the back burner. It wasn't like the forefront of the book. So I don't know, I liked this, but I probably wouldn't give it more than 3 stars. So I really don't need to keep this because I'm only planning on keeping like 4 and 5 star books on my shelves. So it must go. And then we have Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. If you saw my recent vlog and ranking of all of his books, you'll know that I recently DNF'd this book. It just really wasn't for me. I didn't connect to the characters. It wasn't creepy. I didn't really like the idea behind the haunting. I thought all of the characters were very much stereotypes, and it just wasn't for me. I just wasn't hooking into the story. So despite it being like super short, it's only like 230 pages. I couldn't even make it that far. I DNF'd this halfway through. So yeah, I'm gonna get rid of it. Then we have All I Want by Darcy Bell. And this is about a couple who move into this house that they think is haunted. And I think the concept is really cool because this house that they bought has a theater attached to it. And they're both like drama people, and they want to put on like a play and stuff in their house. Then it might have ghosts. You know, it just sounded really, really cool. But I don't know, I just couldn't really connect to it the way I wanted to. I just couldn't get behind it. And then the ending came, and the ending sucks. So if you read this book, don't read the last chapter because it will literally ruin the book for you. I was so angry, so upset. So it's decent enough if you don't read that last chapter, but that last chapter will ruin it. I hated the ending. So I don't know, if it was just an okay story and then had a bad ending, then why am I hanging on to this? And then we have Don't Let In the Cold. This is a YA novel, and I thought it was a home invasion story, but it's really not. So you have this girl who goes with her new stepsister to this house that's like a vacation house, and so it's during the time of year where most people are at their regular house, and so they're on this mountain pretty much by themselves, and they get snowed in because their parents are off on their honeymoon. And I thought it was a home invasion story, and the beginning had great atmosphere and very creepy vibes, and I was gearing up for a great, thriller, but then it wasn't. It was like something happens, which I don't want to tell you what it is, and they end up like wandering around in the snow, and they meet this guy, and I don't know. I ended up DNFing this halfway through because it just wasn't the story I wanted it to be, and I found it very predictable. So yeah, this just wasn't for me. Then we have The Soulmate by Sally Hepworth. And I actually did enjoy my time reading this, but it's one of those thrillers that's pretty forgettable. I've already forgotten the twists and who done it and all of that stuff. And so, I don't know, it's one of those thrillers that it's a good time while you're reading it, but you're not going to remember it. I don't really feel the need to reread this. It's not a new favorite. It's just a popcorn thriller. So I'm like, I've read this. Let's move on. Let's give it to somebody else that might like it. Then we have Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. And for the most part, I did enjoy this one, but it wasn't very thrilling. So I knew there was going to be a murder, and I was waiting for it and waiting for it and waiting for it. And it doesn't happen until like 2/3 of the book is already gone. It's just about these people that are on this island together, and they're just hanging out, and I can't remember if they're stranded or just there on vacation, maybe a bit of both, but I don't know. It's like I didn't hate my time with it, but I was just like, okay, where's the thrilling part? Where's the murder? Where's the suspense, And it just wasn't there until most of the book was already over. And then I didn't really care for the ending. Our main character makes certain decisions at the end, which I couldn't really get behind. So yeah, this is probably my least favorite of Rachel Hawkins so far, and despite the beautiful cover, I just don't feel the need to keep this. Then we have Murder Road by Simone St. James, and this was a huge, huge, huge disappointment. This was a 2-star read for me. I love Simone St. James, and this sounded very, very intriguing, and this is what I wanted Road of Bones to be, because it is about a haunted road and does have ghosts, but that aspect of the story is so minuscule. Like, you hardly hear anything about it. It was so boring. I was so bored by this book, and it was really a disappointing read for me. So yeah, I don't want to keep this. And then we had She Started It. This one I thought was very, very predictable, and the writing was a little bit mediocre and juvenile in my opinion. So it wasn't the best thriller that I've read. So I'm gonna get rid of it. And then we have Someone in the Attic. I was so excited for this book because, again, I wanted a home invasion story. But just like with Don't Let In the Cold, I thought I was getting a home invasion story, and it really wasn't. And there was very little suspense or thrill to this book. It was pretty boring, pretty typical thriller. Didn't really care for the ending. I thought it was predictable. So this just wasn't what I wanted it to be. And then we have 52 Reasons to Hate My Father. This is a YA novel. And I actually really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a really, really good book. But again, I'm at that age where, this is more of a teenage book, and I'm never going to reread it. It's not really my demographic anymore, and I really don't need to keep this on my shelves anymore. And then we have Letters for Emily. And I'm the type of person who has a really hard time getting rid of books that I haven't read yet. I really have a hard time. I know some people are like, oh, I'm never going to read this, get rid of it. Oh, that's not my mood anymore, I'm going to get rid of it. Oh, I don't like fantasy anymore, just get rid of it. But for me, my books have so much potential. And what if I'm giving up a new favorite and I don't even know it? I have a hard time giving up books. But I'm going to do that now. I have not read this book, but it's been on my shelves for probably 15 years and I've never reached for it. I've never read it. So I'm like, if I've had this for 15 years, I'm never going to get to this book. You know, if I haven't gotten to it yet, it's just not going to happen. So why am I hanging on to this? Okay, that's all my horror and thriller books. So now I'm going to get into some romance. We have The Secrets of the Indian Orchid. This is a Regency romance, and I really did enjoy it, but it's one of those books where, like I said earlier, with The Soulmate, where I enjoyed it while I was reading it, but it's pretty forgettable and I'm never going to reread it. And so it's like, you know, I've read it, it's done, it's over, let's move on type of book. Then we have Austenland by Shannon Hale, and I really didn't like this book. I liked the idea of it because you have this woman who goes to this, I don't know what you would call it, like a retreat or something, or a vacation spot. I don't know. I don't know what it's called, but basically you can play act like you're in a Jane Austen novel. So you dress up in Regency clothes and you know, go to this manor house out in the country, you know, and you pretend that you're in a Jane Austen novel, basically, you know, and they have actors there that act like they're falling in love with you. So you can have your own love story with Mr. Darcy, you know, and different things. But then she starts a real romance with, I think, like the gardener or something, you know, and so when she's not play acting, living like she's in Regency times, she will hang out with this one of the staff members, basically. But I don't know, I just didn't like this. It just didn't work for me. And the romance aspects, they didn't feel genuine. Like there's something that happens, a bit of a twist, I guess you could call it. And it didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel genuine. And I just didn't connect to these characters. I didn't connect to the story. It sounds like something I would love. Like, I love the premise. It sounds so fun, but it just didn't work for me. Then we have The Girl in the Gatehouse, and this is just like Letters for Emily, where I haven't read this yet, but I've had it on my shelves for, again, probably 15 years. So obviously, I'm just never going to get to this. And for a romance, it's super long. It's like almost 400 pages, and I just think for a romance, that's too long. Like, I get bored if the romance takes that long because you have to have all this filler. I don't know. I'm not really interested in reading this anymore. Then we have Within These Dark Hills. And again, this is one that I really enjoyed while I was reading it. I thought it was a pretty decent romance. This one's not Regency romance. This is actually set in America during like the early pioneer days of our country. And I think this man works at like a mine or something. I don't know. But I did enjoy this one. I did like it. But again, I'm never going to reread it. I read it ages ago, and so I don't even really remember it that well. And so I'm like, I don't need to keep this. And then I have 3 books by Sarah Eden. We have A Fine Gentleman. This is about a girl who's coming over from Spain, and she meets this man who says that he can help get her brother over to England and tries to help her out, but then they strike up a romance. And then we have The Kiss of a Stranger, and this is about a man who meets this woman and decides to kiss her just because why not? Apparently he thinks she's a maid and she's very pretty, and they connect, and so he's like, I'm just gonna steal a kiss, you know? But he didn't realize that she's not a maid. She's actually a very highly regarded lady in society. And so now the dad, you know, was like, you ruined my daughter's reputation, so now you have to marry her. So I don't know, pretty fun. And then we have Romancing Daphne. So all of these books I did enjoy reading. I did like them. But again, they're not like top favorites, and they're not something I'm ever going to reread. So I just don't need to hold on to them anymore. And then we have How to End a Love Story, and I thought this one sounded really fun and really good, but then I started hearing reviews about it being really spicy, and I'm just not a smutty girl. I just don't like smutty romance. That's not me. I like more of the sexual tension and will they or won't they get together, you know, because with smutty romance, it's like they get together halfway through the book and then the whole rest of the book is just about them having sex, and that's so boring. You know, when I read romance, it's all about their love story of getting together, you know? It's all about that happily ever after kiss at the end. I guess I'm just a Disney girl, I don't know. So it's just not the type of romance I like and enjoy. So again, I have not read this one, but I'm just gonna go ahead and give it to somebody who does like smutty books. So that's all the books I have for you. All of these are going to be on Pango.com if you're interested in purchasing any of them for yourself, because maybe you would enjoy them more than me. And like I said, I did enjoy some of them. I just don't need to keep them because I'm not going to reread them. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please let me know by giving that thumbs up a jab. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I post a video every Friday, and I hope to see you in the next one. See ya.